r/NoSleep. Posted by u/rosawrites. I've been having nightmares since my boyfriend and I moved in together. Aiden, I asked, is that you? Of course he answered, who else would it be? I peered closer into his face, but the harder I looked, the surer I was that something was wrong with him. I couldn't place it at first, but as I looked into his eyes, I realized that they were further apart than I remembered. Yes, weren't his eyes closer together? And his grin. As he smiled, I thought about the dimple in his right cheek, the one that I was so familiar with, but this man had a dimple in his left cheek. Or was I misremembering? I took a step away from Aiden, my trust faltering, and he confidently took a step forward. Instead of asking me what was wrong, he roughly grabbed my forearm, and I thought that Aiden would never do that. He would never grab me, he would hug me and ask what was bothering me. The man, the Aiden imposter, leered at me, yanking me towards him. I screamed, but, no, I'm in a different place now. I'm thrashing in my bedroom and real Aiden is rubbing my arm, trying to comfort me and saying that, everything is alright, you're okay now. I used to have these kinds of dreams a lot, I said the next morning. We had recently moved in together, and I was still getting used to waking up with someone else beside me each morning. Or having to explain my bad dreams to someone. What was the dream actually about? He asked, rolling over onto his side to face me. He was still groggy, and I wondered if he had gone back to sleep quickly or if I had kept him up. It's creepy, I said. It might not sound like much if I were to describe it to you. He waited expectantly. Basically, I'm in a room with someone I know. In this case, it was you. But the more I look at you, the more wrong you look. Like, you're an imposter or something. In this dream, you started to look like a different person. The more you looked like an imposter, the scarier you got, and I woke up just as you were about to do something bad to me. Yeesh, he said. That is creepy. I know, I said. I first started getting them when I was a kid. When my mom got sick. He squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. That sounds scary. It was scary, I was just a kid, but as she got progressively worse, my dreams got worse, too. Her body wasted away from the cancer, but it was a good 6 months before she really looked like a skeleton. About once or twice a week, I'd have a dream that she was healthy again, but as I stared at her, I'd realize that I was wrong, that this couldn't be my mom, because the longer I stared at her, the worse she looked. Like I'd realized that a clump of her hair was falling out, or that her skin was turning sallow, until she'd morph into this monster of a person, and she'd give me this terrible, evil, knowing grin and then I'd wake up. Damn. He pulled me in for a hug. I'm sorry, that sounds really hard. It was. I had a childhood psychiatrist and stuff while all of this was going on, and she used to tell me that dreams were a way of the brain expressing anxieties. In my case, my mom was getting sick, which was out of my control. And so, seeing this person I knew so well, seeing how they were changing and there was nothing I could do to stop it, sparked this intense dread and panic in me. As an adult, I tend to have them during particularly stressful periods in my life. Or, in our case, if I'm going through a big life change that I don't feel I have control over. Moving in together? He asked. Yeah, I think so. I love living with you, and I'm happy we made that decision, but I think this is just my brain's way of getting rid of some of the anxiety surrounding the move. I've never lived with someone I'm dating before. It's okay, he said. I understand. Having a mom to talk to would have helped with some of my bigger life changes. She never got to meet Aiden, she'd never get to give me a hot take on what she thought of him, whether he lived up to her expectations. My dad was pretty hands-off, my parents had been divorced for a few years before she got sick, and I only saw him in the summers. After she died, he asked me if I wanted to live with him full-time, but I said no, that I'd stay with my stepdad, Steve. He didn't seem to care, and I still visited him each summer until I graduated high school. We hadn't spoken in years. Steve had always been everything my real dad wasn't. He loved my mom, and he loved raising me. Before my mom passed away, she convened Steve and I in the same room. I want you two to stick together, she had said, a tear dropping down her cheek. That might be asking a lot, but I need you both to promise me that you'll take care of each other. I promise, Steve had said, sitting by her bedside. He looked up at me and smiled, even though I knew he was probably afraid. I called Steve that day to tell him about the dream. We typically talked once or twice a week. We remained close over the years, just like we had promised Mom. We were surprisingly frank with each other, Maybe because we had been so honest and transparent throughout the grieving process over my mother. I always felt like I could express my feelings with Steve. He was a large reason why I was so well adjusted, despite the trauma of losing my mom. "I think you're right about the change being destabilizing," he said. "You've only had the single dream?" "Yeah, but it hasn't even been a month since moving in with Aiden. I don't want this to be a recurring thing." "I wouldn't sweat it," he said. "I'd just share it with your therapist at your next session." I didn't tell him that I'd taken a hiatus from therapy. My health insurance provider switched when my company merged with some larger conglomerate, and her office didn't take the new provider. My therapist suggested that it could be a good opportunity to take a break from therapy and see how I liked it. "If you want to come back, I'm sure we can figure something out," she'd said. "But it could be a great trial run to see if therapy is still something that is a necessary constant in your life." Even though it was scary, I'd taken her advice. I'd been in therapy many times, attending off and on when my grief got overwhelming, but I'd felt like this therapist had made the most difference. For the first time since my mom died, I felt like I had control over my chronic anxiety and depression. I think it was a combination of time, perseverance, and her just being an overall great fit for me. I was proud to think of the progress I'd made, and I didn't want to go back to our sessions over one nightmare. Steve was right, it was probably normal. About a week later, I had the dream again. This time, I opened the door after coming home from work. I saw a man sitting at our kitchen table, Aiden. It was Aiden sitting at the kitchen table. I went to give him a kiss, when I realized that something was off about his posture. He was sitting with his head unnaturally held to the side, falling over to his right shoulder as if he was a broken bobblehead. "Aiden?" I asked, alarmed, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. "What happened to your head?" But it wasn't just that. As he spoke, his voice came out low and garbled. "What do you mean?" the voice asked. "My head always looks like this." And he grinned, but his grin was terrifying, his parted lips revealing sharp, pointed teeth. I turned my head away, a scream building, but I could still hear him laugh. "What are you so afraid of?" "Hey," Aiden is saying, "I'm here, there's nothing to be afraid of." I'm crying, and I'm awake now. Our bedside lamp is on, and Aiden looks worried, his eyes bloodshot and crusty. "I had a bad dream," I say, shuddering as I wipe tears away. "I know," he says, rubbing my back. "It's okay, I'm here." But as he says it, I double take, staring at his teeth. They look sharper in the dim light, but I shake my head, trying to lose the false visual from my dream, reminding myself that everything is okay now. After the second dream, Aiden looked at me a bit more closely. He asked me if everything was alright, or if I wanted to see my therapist again. He asked me if there was anything he could do to make our new apartment feel more comfortable. I told him, no, everything was fine, but on my next call with Steve, I told a different story. "I think it's that this doesn't feel like my apartment still," I said. "You know how foreign an apartment feels the first night you sleep in it? Like it's not home yet, so everything feels kind of scary? I'm still at that stage. Is Aiden acting strange at all?" Steve asked in reply. "Or is it entirely just the new environment that is tripping you up?" "No, Aiden is great," I said. "He's been super nice, even though I'm sure he's kind of weirded out. I was crying and everything after this dream." "If he's a decent person, he'll understand," Steve said. "It's nothing to be ashamed of, it's PTSD, I mean soldiers have these kinds of reactions. It's not a reflection of your character or anything. Don't be too hard on yourself." I agreed with him from an objective perspective, but internally, I felt concern gathering. Was this too much too fast? We'd been dating for 15 months, but maybe that still wasn't enough time to know I was ready to move in with him. I'd had attachment issues leading into adulthood. Losing a parent made me terrified of relying on anyone else for anything. I didn't think I could take more loss in my life. I dated people here and there, but Aiden was my first serious relationship. The best thing about him was his consistency. He was always there for me, even when I didn't ask. If he said he'd be somewhere, he was there. If he promised something, he'd always deliver. I told him early on that my mom had passed away, and he told me early on that his last girlfriend ghosted him, leaving his place one morning only to never reach out to him again. We both agreed to be transparent with each other. After a year of dating, he finally brought up moving in together. We spent so much time at each other's places, and I was tired of driving 40 minutes through LA traffic each time we wanted to hang out. My lease was a month-to-month, so we waited the 3 months until his year lease would end and then took the plunge. I loved our apartment. It was small, but it had beautiful, black trim detailing and a tree whose leaves tickled our bedroom window in the mornings. It was quiet, a place I could feel safe in with lots of natural light and bright wood floors. I was looking forward to decorating it, adding nicer furniture than I could afford living alone. Aiden felt the same. We applied for the place the same day we saw it. Still, I didn't quite feel like it was home. A sense of unease accompanied me, and I wasn't sure if that was the feeling of uncertainty that came with knowing I had signed a year-long lease with someone I was dating, or if it was just getting used to the sights and sounds of the apartment. Things could have been worse, though. I enjoyed eating breakfast together, joking around before I headed off to the office, and sharing my day-to-day with someone I cared about. Aiden worked remote, which seemed isolating to me, but I think he liked the flexibility. I was happy. A few days after my second dream, Aiden called me midday. "I have to run an errand this evening, so I'm going to be home late," he said. "Feel free to eat dinner without me." "Oh, okay," I said. "Is everything alright?" "Yeah, don't worry," he said, "I have a surprise for you." He enunciated surprise, dragging it out to really drive home that I should be excited. "What? A surprise?" "Don't ask any questions," he laughed, "it'll be better that way. I can't wait for you to see it." "What's the occasion?" I asked, trying not to get too excited about the possibilities of what he could be getting me. "It's not an occasion per se, but I do think it's something that will make you feel better in our new place." Alright, I said, and the anticipation gnawed at me the rest of the day. Aiden wasn't really one for surprises. I was wearing a skincare mask when he came home, a bark accompanying him. "What the?" I called in shock as a ball of fur came barreling at me. "Did you?" "I did," he said, grinning from ear to ear. I screamed, startling the dog, and ripped off my goopy mask, sprinting to the bathroom to wipe my face before running back to the front door. Tears were gathering in my eyes. "This is a joke, this can't be real." "Oh, it's real," he said. "I thought a guard dog would help you feel better in this new place. I called the landlord, they approved it with an additional deposit." "This is amazing," I cried. The dog trotted my way, smiling a toothy grin and wagging his tail. It was an Australian Shepherd, a medium-sized dog with a speckled snout and cream belly. "It's a boy," he said. "His name was Snickers, but I figured we can rename him to whatever you want." We renamed Snickers to Milo, and the next month was a blur of walks, tricks, and the occasional doggy accident. I sent lots of pictures to Steve, who had been in on the surprise the whole time. "I endorsed the idea," he said. "I know you always wanted a dog." Steve had terrible allergies, and my mom wasn't a fan of pets in general. When she had passed away, we got a hairless cat named Nor, but he always felt like Steve's pet more than mine. He loved snuggling up with him and sleeping in his room, which would have bothered me, but I'm not much of a cat person anyways. "Having a dog has helped," I replied. "I haven't had any bad dreams since, and I think a lot of my anxiety has been redirected towards making sure I can take care of Milo and keep him from getting into trouble." Soon after that call, though, I had another bad dream. In my dream, I was getting Milo's leash to take him for a walk. He made a noise, but it didn't quite sound right. I turned to look at him. "Milo, buddy, are you okay?" But as I knelt to put his collar around his neck, he was slowly opening his mouth, wider and wider. He barked, but the bark came out from deep within his throat, as if emitting from a speaker. His body stayed perfectly still as the bark echoed, again, before he shuddered and croaked. "Milo." I gave him a little shake. He turned his head to look at me, but his eyes looked wrong. They were yellow instead of brown, and they looked to be growing wider. Each time I blinked, they expanded, more and more, before they filled up his face. I started to scream, and as he opened his mouth again, I heard that deep, speaker-like bark. By now, he was just eyes with a mouth, barking and gaping, and as I turned to run, I could sense him gearing to pounce. That's when I woke up, sunlight already coming in through the window, alone in my bed. I gasped, wondering where Aiden was, sweat beaded on my forehead. I didn't hear Milo, either, so I wondered if Aiden had already taken him for a walk. I looked at the clock, 8:45 a.m. Shit, I thought, I'd overslept an hour past when I normally got up. I felt like I had been hit by a car, my body ached, and I realized that I was feverish, not just the typical night sweats. I opened Slack and sent my manager a quick message. "Hi Sarah, I'm coming down with a fever so won't be working today. I can check Slack later today if there are any emergencies or escalations." She responded quickly. "Sorry to hear that. No worries, take care of yourself." Soon after, I heard Aiden and Milo coming in through the front door. The pitter-patter of feet told me that Milo was heading up the stairs, and I smiled as he trotted into the room. "I'm sorry, buddy," I said. "I'm not feeling too well today." This Milo looked nothing like the Milo from my dream. I patted his head as he tried to scramble up into the bed. "No, Milo," I said, trying to stop him as Aiden walked into the room. "Hey, babe," he said. "You doing okay? I didn't want to wake you this morning, you looked feverish." "Yeah, I think I'm coming down with something." He put his hand to my forehead. "Do you have any other symptoms?" "No, although I did have a pretty bad fever dream." "Aw, you poor thing." He gave me a hug. "I can get you some soup later today, do you need anything right now? Tea? Let's get you some Tylenol, too." "Okay," I said. "I'm probably just going to sleep it off." I gave Steve a call later that day. "Hey, I'm not doing so hot over here. I've got a fever and stuff." "Ah, I'm sorry to hear that, kiddo." "Yeah, it sucks, but Aiden is taking care of me, and I called out of work." "Make sure you rest up, drink some fluids," he said. "Hey, how are you doing by the way? Still having those dreams?" "Unfortunately, yes," I said. "Now they're about Milo, I'm sure it's the stress, plus first-time pet ownership. And my fever." "Okay," he said. "Make sure you call me if you need to talk about anything. What does your therapist think?" I sighed. Actually, I stopped seeing my therapist. We're doing a trial period without her. "Oh," he said, surprised. "That's new." "Yeah," I said, "but besides the dreams, it's been fine. I'll make sure to call her if things get particularly bad." "All right, just make sure you take care of yourself, okay? I'm here if you need anything. Maybe you can stop by next weekend, and I can meet Milo?" "That sounds great," I said, smiling. Steve lived about an hour and a half away, but I felt Milo was old enough to make it through the trip. Once Aiden was off of work, I asked him if he could stop by the store for a thermometer. "My fever still feels pretty bad," I said. "I have a raging headache, so I'd like to monitor my temperature." "I'm sure you'll be fine," he said. Aiden was one of those guys who refused to go to the doctor, who thought a bit of grit could fight off any illness. I didn't share his sentiments, I'd seen my mom's deterioration. "I want the thermometer anyways. It'll be nice to have on hand." "Okay," but he was grumbling. I got a bit annoyed. I was sick, couldn't he see that? He took Milo out for a walk, and I awoke from another feverish nap with him standing by my side, holding out the thermometer. 102.3, the thermometer flashed. Holy shit, I let out a weak yelp. "That's pretty high." "When's the last time you took Tylenol?" he asked. "I don't think since this morning. Still, I wish I had known it was this high earlier, I should have gone to urgent care." "Ah, it's probably nothing serious," he said. "Take some more Tylenol, and we can worry about it in the morning." I was a bit disturbed. A high fever wasn't anything to joke about, but another part of me wondered if I was just overreacting. Another night couldn't hurt, right? I opened my eyes. It was dark in the room, and Aiden was peering over me. "What?" I asked him groggily, still sweating up a storm. He didn't answer, just sat there, staring. His mouth started to move. He opened it, wider and wider, too wide, his pointed teeth glinting. "What are you doing? You're freaking me out," I said, trying to inch away. His face started to change. His cheekbones shifted until I didn't recognize the face I was staring at. With his wide mouth, I heard the barking noise from my last dream, the speaker-like sound emitting from deep in his throat. But as I started screaming, he started laughing. I closed my eyes, trying to wake up, but I didn't. "No," I thought, my stomach dropping out from under me. He picked up a pillow, and, still smiling, lunged toward my face. I rolled out of bed, hitting my head on the ground with a crack. "Are you okay?" I opened my eyes with Aiden, normal Aiden, concerned and alarmed, hovering over me. I felt cold and clammy, and my head was throbbing. "Jesus, are you alright?" "I think so," I said, but my voice came out hoarse. "Nightmare. Must have rolled out of bed. I had done that when I was a kid. Steve had to install a bed gate, even though I was almost a teenager, to keep me from hurting myself. Even so, these dreams were different. My mom had never been a monster, she just had wasted away in front of me. Even that was enough to terrify me, watching my mom's impending and ultimate death in the span of a nightmare. In these dreams, Aiden was about to hurt me. Mila felt aggressive in my other dream, too. I had felt like I was in danger. I put a hand to my forehead, it was burning. And as I sat up with Aiden's help, I felt blood trickling from above my eye where I had hit the floor. "Oh my God," I said, trembling. "I should go to the doctor." "No," Aiden said, "you'll be okay. Heads bleed more than any other body part." I looked at him, incredulous. "Are you serious?" I croaked. "I feel like shit. I could have a concussion, and my fever is still raging. I need a doctor." "No, you don't," he said firmly. "You don't have a concussion, you just bumped your head. Your fever isn't even that bad. It's better for you to try to get some sleep. Nothing is going to happen to you in the few hours before morning. Besides, I'm here to take care of you. It's safer for me to drive you to the doctor in the morning. And it'll save you money. You could make a real appointment tomorrow. If you went now, you'd have to handle a giant ER bill." I didn't know what to do, but short of calling 911, I knew I wasn't going to be able to go to the doctor without him driving me. After what felt like hours, I fell back asleep. The next morning, I still felt like shit. My head hurt, and the coagulated blood had left a stain on my pillow. Even with taking consistent Tylenol, my fever was at 102. A bit better, but high enough to worry me. I texted Steve. "Call a doctor," he responded. "And your therapist." He was right. I dialed my general practitioner while Aiden was in the shower. She couldn't see me until the following morning but urged me to go to the ER if my fever reached 103. I texted my therapist, who couldn't see me until the end of the week but offered a 15-minute phone check-in if I was free that afternoon. I accepted, texting her a brief synopsis about my worrying dreams and, this morning, increased paranoia. Like my doctor, she said to go to the ER if I was having an emergency, mental health or otherwise. "I'll talk to you at 2, she signed off. "Take care of yourself." Aiden got out of the shower. "How are you doing, babe? You look a little better than last night at least." He came up to me, gingerly touching my face. "You scared me with that fall." "Not enough to help me go to the hospital," I snapped, my resentment bubbling to the surface. "Huh?" he asked. "I don't know what you mean." "I wanted to go to the hospital, but you told me to wait," I said. "You told me to call the doctor in the morning." "You're twisting my words. I just said it'd be cheaper for you to go see the doctor in the morning." "Did you make an appointment?" "Yeah, they don't have an opening until tomorrow." "All right, well that's good at least. I'm going to take Milo out. Do you need anything? Maybe an ice pack?" "No, I'm fine," I said, but I didn't feel fine. I felt like I was losing my mind. First, I slacked my boss to tell her that I still wasn't feeling any better. I asked her if there were any emergencies at the office or with my cases that needed review, but she said to not worry about it and that it had been a slow week. I tried not to think about whether she was telling the truth. I had a feeling I'd be slammed when I finally went back, but that was a problem for another day. After that, I tried self-diagnosing my symptoms. A million different things could cause a fever, and my dreams could very well just be a side effect. I missed my mom the most when I was sick. There's something about being ill that made me particularly yearn being taken care of, that made me remember her maternal affection and care. I didn't feel like Aiden was doing enough. He was a bit distant since I started feeling poorly, and I still thought it was odd that he refused to take me to the hospital the night before. But I guess he was right, because I was feeling better. It probably was just a passing thing, and I would have had a huge hospital bill for nothing. My head still hurt, but not terribly, and the Tylenol helped. During my 15-minute check-in with my therapist, she started by reassuring me that change can bring up triggering emotions and trauma responses. She said she wanted a full session with me the following week, but that one trick she wanted me to try in the meantime was to visualize a positive ending for the bad dreams I was having. I thought about Milo, how warm and happy he made me feel when he licked my face and rolled in the grass on our walks. Maybe, instead of his scary speaker voice bark, in the dream there would be a happy bark, a standard Milo bark, and the dream would end with me feeding him an extra treat. "Sure, that sounds pleasant," she said. "What about his distorted face?" "A trick of the light," I said. "Nothing scary." "Now, what about your dream with Aiden?" I shuddered. There was something more realistic about those dreams. Something instinctually more distressing about the way he peered over me. I'm trying to imagine something better. Maybe, right before he gets scary, he wraps me in a hug and tells me he loves me. That he'll always take care of me. Tears started to prick my eyes. "Yep, there we are," said my therapist. "I know we've talked before about some of your fears of abandonment, About being alone. Let's twist that on its head. Aiden in the dream is telling you he'll be there for you, that he's there to support you, and that it's time for you to let your guard down a bit. Time to stop looking for the red flags. Before Aiden, all I'd had was Steve. True, he had legally adopted me, and true, he was a better parent than I could have dreamed of, but having only one other person to count on isn't a great bet. I'd always tried not to think of what would happen when Steve passed away, when I truly became alone. Being with Aiden presented me with the possibility that maybe I would find someone else, and maybe I'd even have a family of my own someday. I felt stupid for being so suspicious of him. My therapist was right. I was sure I'd feel fine by morning. That night, I gave Milo a few pets before bed. I was less worried about getting him sick, as my fever had gone down to 100. I was in better spirits. Everything was going to be fine, I just needed a good night's sleep. Aiden, do you mind if I run the fan tonight for some added white noise? I asked him. I was hot last night, too, and I think it'd help me sleep better overall. Of course, he said. You look a lot better compared to yesterday. I told you it was nothing. I know, I sighed, you were right. This time. I'm always right, he smiled. We put Milo down and headed to bed. I opened my eyes. I turned my head and in the dark, I could see Aiden kneeling at my side of the bed. It was eerily quiet, the fan wasn't on anymore. Another nightmare, I thought. Aiden, I said. What are you doing? He didn't answer. He peered at me, eyes wide, mouth slowly curving into a smile, exposing those same pointed teeth. My heart pounded. Think of a good ending. Aiden, I said. Are you getting something from under the bed? Why are you kneeling? Why don't you come lay down with me? He didn't say anything. He opened his mouth, slowly, creaking it open as he did so. I tried deep breaths, calming myself. It's a dream. Just a dream. Aiden, why don't you give me a hug? I started reaching my arms out when I heard barking, frantic and real, not the creepy radio bark from my dreams. There was a scratch at the door. Milo? I called out. Aiden's head whipped to the door, the smile dropping from his face. I felt weak, my fever seemed to be back, and my head throbbed. More scratching and whining. Milo, what is it, buddy? I wanted to get up, wanted to go to the door and let him in, but Aiden was still kneeling next to me, terrifying and real. All my positive thoughts, my positive endings, were gone. This isn't a dream. As this thought occurred, my stomach plummeted. I trembled, not knowing what to do. My eyes darted to my phone, out of reach on the ground, next to Aiden. Aiden's eyes turned back to me. His smile was gone, but his eyes were still wide and peering. I expected him to grab me, to hurt me, but instead, he snatched my phone and darted under the bed. Yes, under the bed. I didn't even know a person could fit under our bed, it was a low frame. I was so startled, I let out a yell. From under the bed came the sound of creaking, and then that terrible, awful, speaker-like bark. Milo started whining, then yelping, from outside the door. I made my move. I sprinted out of the bed, despite my fever. I swung open the door, only to see Milo, still as a statue at the door, mouth widening impossibly wide. I tried to grab him, thinking I could still save my dog and figure out how to fix him, but he was too heavy. I could already hear the speaker bark growing louder, and I screamed when I saw that Aiden was climbing out from under the bed. His legs emerged first, spindly and strange, unfolding as if they had been tucked away. I made to run, but Milo blocked the stairs. He, too, was now emitting the speaker bark, sitting on his haunches as if waiting for me to make a move. Panicked, I looked from Aiden to Milo and back again, trying to figure out which was worse. I decided to chance neither, instead pulling open our beautiful, black-trimmed window and jumping out. A pedestrian saw me fall, and miraculously, the only major injury I had was a broken tailbone. It still hurt like hell, but our second floor wasn't too high up off the ground, so I ultimately got lucky. When the ambulance came, it was already growing light outside. Aiden and Milo came to the front door as they pulled up, apparently awoken by the sirens. As if they hadn't been terrorizing me an hour earlier. Aiden looked shocked and afraid, asking me what the hell had happened, but I didn't respond. I knew better than to respond. Somehow, Aiden spun everything as if I was the freak. In the hospital, he told the police that I had a hysterical attack. He said my anxiety had been building the whole week and it got much worse when I started feeling under the weather. He even told them about my therapist, and that I had stopped seeing her. That was all they needed to hear to chalk me up as a crazy person. They wrote off everything I told them about him trying to attack me. I stayed in the hospital all day, waiting for Steve to arrive as they took my vital signs and giving me some painkillers for the broken tailbone after determining it would likely heal on its own. Since I already had a therapist appointment scheduled, and Steve reassured them that I would be closely monitored, they let me go without inpatient psychiatric treatment. I broke up with Aiden before I was discharged. I hadn't let in more Milo in to see me. He seemed genuinely hurt, if not a bit relieved, given I was now a certified crazy person. "We can work through this together," he had said, but I shrank away from him. I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw had been real. Steve, meanwhile, was distraught. I told him my side of the story, and for the first time in my life, I felt like he wasn't on my team. He told me I shouldn't have ever stopped going to therapy, that moving in with Aiden had been too big of a change for me. He offered to help me pay off my rent that I was supposed to split with Aiden for the next few months, and that I could stay with him for a while to get back on my feet. I was hurt. We had been through terrible things together before, things much worse than moving in with my boyfriend. He should know that I could handle difficult situations. I knew my story was implausible, but I was telling the truth. I couldn't help wondering how my mom would feel if she were still alive. Would she believe me? My therapist agreed with Steve. I started seeing her twice a week, her goal being to convince me that I had imagined the whole episode with Aiden. She was disturbed that I refused to see Milo. "There's nothing to be afraid of," she said. "I think reconnecting with your pet would be a positive experience." "Milo isn't my pet," I said, "he's Aiden's pet." Saying the words out loud killed me, but I knew that I couldn't risk it. Maybe I'd get a new dog someday, and maybe I'd get a new boyfriend, but for now, I was better off on my own. Better off sharing space with Steve, trying to appear normal enough so he could stop watching me like a small child. Secretly, I think he blamed himself a bit for my episode. Maybe he thought that he shouldn't have agreed with my decision to move in with Aiden, or maybe he believed he should have seen signs of a mental decline. As much as I tried, I couldn't seem to convince him that there wasn't anything wrong with me, that Aiden was the crazy person. How was I so certain? Well, a couple weeks after the accident, I did some digging. Where had Aiden gotten Milo? I called all the Aussie breeders in the area, but none of them had sold a dog to Aiden. I called the shelters but, same thing. Was Milo a rescue? Was he stolen? Was he even a dog? Then, I tried to look more into Aiden. I had never searched for him on LinkedIn, our jobs were in totally different sectors, and I never really used my account anyways. There was nothing. I tried to think of the name of the company he worked for, but I realized he had always been so vague. I realized I didn't even have any evidence that he ever worked. For all I knew, he could have spent all day dicking around while I was out at the office. Finally, I thought about how he had never introduced me to his family or friends. He was new to the area when we met, but I did think it was strange that he had never suggested we take a trip to his hometown. Nobody ever came to visit him, either. Who was Aiden? What was he? What disturbs me most of all is, just when I feel like I'm making progress, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and swear that I've heard something outside of my window. A loud, low, speaker-like bark.